Okay. Hi.
Hi.
I'm Emily.
Emily, yes, I remember you.
Yes. Oh, okay. So I guess the first question is just your general information about at what time did you serve in the military, and also why did you decide to join?
I joined in the military in 1942. I turned 18 years old just a little while back and decided that after we were now basically in the World War II, and I and many of my friends decided it's time for us to do all we could to help. So I went down to the recruiting station and signed up. I signed up, I was 18 in the fall of 1942, I guess. I had graduated from high school earlier that year and had started college in Albany. But I decided joining up the military at the time was probably more important, so I went down and did that. I did stay in college though, because when I first signed up, I got assigned to the reserve, the United States Army Reserve, and this we did call up to active duty. In the meantime, I spent a year in college at the State University. It was in the State Teachers College at Albany. And so I was there. Actually, I got 1 year in there when I was 17, I guess, before I could sign up. And then the second year I turned 18, and then I was eligible for the Army, so I went down, joined, and got assigned to the Army Reserve Corps. And then during that fall also, I saw a notice on the bulletin board at college about a program to train meteorologists for the Air Force, Army Air Corps. And so I applied for that, and I got accepted into that and called to active duty to be assigned to New York University meteorology program. And so I went into active duty in the early spring of 1945, I guess it was. And so that's how I got in.
It's wonderful.
Then I spent this, I filled out papers and so then I spent a year at New York University in their master's meteorological program. I was about the youngest guy in there. Many of my other people in that program had already graduated from college and had degrees. They were awarded master's degrees at the end of the program. Since I didn't have a bachelor's degree, I got a certificate. But anyway, that's how I got in and spent the first year of my military at New York University.
Was meteorology something that you were originally interested in at all, or was that just because of the poster that you saw?
Let me turn up the volume of this. I don't
Okay, so were you originally interested in meteorology or just the poster?
No, when I went to college, my first year I was only 17, so I hadn't, but I was interested in science, mathematics, so I enrolled in college in double major of science and mathematics. And when I saw this opportunity for meteorology in the Army Air Force, I thought that might keep me science, so I signed up. That's why I applied for the meteorology program.
I want to ask about a specific event about Pearl Harbor. So do you remember where you were when you heard about it, and how do you feel about it?
I heard about
the Pearl Harbor attack.
Yeah, I do remember. As an incident, I think anybody that lived through it will remember. I remember exactly. I was a freshman at college, and I commuted between my home and near Troy and Albany on a bus. And so I was on a bus going to college in Albany on the morning that Pearl Harbor was announced. And I was on the bus when the information came through radios on the bus. And that's when I heard it. And I obviously was greatly overwhelmed and I don't remember much I did the rest of the day, but I was at college and since I was only 17 at the time, I could decide I might as well continue going to college until I got to be 18 when I could enlist. Yeah.
Spending so many years here in Troy, Gene grew up halfway between Emma and here, and actually spent some time on the tennis courts at Emma when you were a kid. They were along, not Pine Woods,
Maple Avenue.
Maple Avenue. And
Maple
do
and
you
College,
know?
you know, College and Maple Avenue come together. Right, and you walk up that hill, there was no road down there, there was just a walkway path, and then you came to the southern gate of Emma Willard. And right,
Elm Grove Gate.
and right beyond the gate, inside the gate of Emma Willard was a tennis court at that time. And I used to go up with a friend, sneak in and play tennis.
When you came, you were Moxie's Ice Cream is? So did you come by that on the way here? So his house is on the Emma Willard side of Moxie's Ice Cream, about a half mile down. If you go back that way, it's on the right. Well, no, that's an earlier house. But anyway, it's so anyway, Gene is local here in Troy.
When I went up to Emma to play tennis, I lived on Collins Avenue then. And Collins Avenue on the hill going down across from School 16. That's where I lived at the time.
Anyway, little connection with Emma.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so
It's
cool.
a deep connection.
Yeah.
It's not just little.
Yeah.
Long time it's been there, Emma.
That was a long time ago, yeah. 100 years.
Yeah. So my next question, our next question is, did you fly over the hump?
Yes.
Yes. And do you have anything to share?
I did a couple of, I was not a pilot, so I didn't fly, but I ended up, they had more meteorology people than they needed. And I ended up being an operations officer, which meant that I had to sign off clearance and make sure the planes were ready and the pilots knew what they were doing and sign the map routes and everything. And when I first got into India, I was very new at it. I didn't know much about it. And so I used to I made some pilot friends and I'd fly with them occasionally just to see what the routes were like and get to understand it better. And this included when I was at Jorhat up in the Assam Valley. Most of the planes there left from India into China directly over the hump. And in order to be familiar with that route, I went with one of my pilot friends, but they had no passengers, just carrying gasoline and equipment and food and other things for the Chinese. And they had only a pilot and a co-pilot. And I joined them with a couple, not more than 2 or 3 times actually, because I didn't especially want to go that route because it was pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
But I would then be able to sit in the crew chief seat, which was halfway, a little behind and between the pilot and co-pilots, so I could sit up in front and listen to the radio to what was going on and see all the scenery underneath, mainly the mountain. So I did that a couple of times, 2 or 3 times during my stay at Jorhat in the Assam Valley. And most of the flights then flew into China, either Kunming or Luoyang, the other alternate airport. The only 2 airports available. Nobody could tell the weather at the time because we didn't have communication. We didn't have radio communication from China to India, so we had to do the best we can from pilot reports of the weather over the hump, and then take our action deciding whether to clear planes or not, depending on that kind of information. But I did make the trip a couple of times just for familiarization of it.
And I got to interject here. I don't know if you all know of this new book, well, relatively new, Skies of Thunder. And if you're interested in that Indo-China route and the people that were flying over the hump and the statistics of the numbers of pilots that didn't make it, this is a fascinating book. It talks when they first start about trying to make roads through the jungle where people would carry piles of rubble back from where they're chipping through the mountains, and they would carry it back miles and dump it to make roads. The war effort is just fantastic. I recommend this book.
Those are the people that really deserve a lot of credit. I was there and saw a lot, but I never had to go through that kind of hardship. These guys are building the road up through forests, through over swamps and smaller mountains and everything. And they had no way of getting supplies in except by airplane. We had to drop food to them in the jungle so they could do this kind of work.
So for our next question, Liz, were you ever bombed or attacked by the Japanese troop at all?
Not directly, no. Japanese planes would sometimes fly overhead, but they so let us alone by and large because they had more important people that had to get the flying Tigers. You know, for example, I was in the Air Transport Command at Luliang when I stayed in China. We had some of the flying Tigers based on the same field on the opposite side of the runway. I got to see a few of them and know a few of them, but they were taking off and more near the end of the war, where the Japanese were much more worried about what's going on down in the South Pacific, and that most of what they had of ammunition, bombs, and such, they reserved for that. So I think I may have written that in this little summary. The only time I really got close to actually fighting in the war was at the end of the war. At the end of the war, when peace was proclaimed, then a lot of the warlords in China who were basically aligned with the communists at the time, not Chiang Kai-shek. They were trying to take over the American military bases. They captured equipment and everything. So just before we closed the base at Luliang, where I was stationed then, we had a sort of emergency. For the closest I ever got to combat, they had a couple of pilots took up cargo planes and kept circling the field to see what was coming on, waiting for people coming. I, including everybody else on base, whether they had combat training or not, had to sleep with the rifles at bedside in case the warlords, the Chinese attacked us and we had to defend the base. That's the only closest I ever came to. Never happened though. We finally got all evacuated to Shanghai without any actual firing.
A small add-on question. Yeah. So about like what you mentioned about the flying tigers, like, kind of just like what was your memories about like the flying tiger in general?
Well, it started out as a voluntary group from of United States pilots who got some planes together, and they volunteered to fight the Japanese before the United States ever was involved officially. So then the Flying Tigers, they got known because they painted the face of a tiger on their airplane. And once the United States joined the war officially, then they became part of the United States Army Air Corps, and so then they're part of the same Army group that I was a member of at the time, but that was later, a lot later in the war, not early on. Early on, it was just a volunteer group.
Thank you.
I never directly worked with the Flying Tigers. I got to meet a few of them. Some were stationed at the same air base I was, but I never really got to know them very well.
Okay.
Okay, so my next question is, were there a lot of mosquitoes, malaria, dengue fever, and so on? And did you ever end up catching any of those?
Well, I was stationed in India, Agra, which is central India, and there the biggest problem was heat. Some days the temperature was up to 110, 15. The airplanes got so hot in the sun that the mechanics had to wear gloves to work on the airplanes. And so the heat was the big problem. There was some malaria, and all over India, that didn't get real bad until I got up in the Assam Valley, which is northeast of Calcutta, going up, and that's where the last takeoff place was to fly the hump. And there, I was living in a tent which was essentially at the end of the jungle, and there mosquitoes were unbelievably bad. We tried to get these gas bombs we could kill them with and keep the tent clean, but they weren't too good. They smelled terrible or good for your health either. But we had Atibrin. It was just an anti-malarial drug. It was when they got water, we couldn't drink regular water around there. The water was too contaminated, so they had special water that had been purified by the health people in the military, and you had to drink water there. Right next to the drinking fountain for the water, there are two little things, containers. One contained Atibrin tablets, anti-malaria. The other contained salt tablets, so you can get enough salt in your system. And we had to eat those all the time. A lot of people did get malaria and were down sick with a while. Most, unfortunately, the Atibrin kept it down so that after a month or two, they could come back and work as normal. But it was a lot of the men did get it. It's a lot worse up in the Assam Valley in eastern India than it was in Agra, Calcutta was more controlled a little bit.
Okay, so for the next question is like, when you came back, did you run into any typhoons at all?
Did I run into anyone?
Typhoon.
I didn't understand.
Bad weather, typhoons or any bad weather.
Well, we had the normal. If you want to over, the weather basically in India is normal for India, but hot during the fall we had, I forget what they call them, this monsoon seasons, I guess they call it. We got through those, which were hot, but the real bad storms that we really worried about was not after the war, it was during the war. Over the Himalayas, they had a lot of thunderstorms, and literally hundreds of our planes are still in the mountains where they came down because of storms in the Himalayan mountains. That's one of the things that I always had in my mind as an operations officer, because when you're sending pilots out over the Himalayas, you really had to worry about the weather, although you didn't have much control over it, much knowledge of it at the time. So the weather was bad over there, but I wouldn't say it's unusual. It's not unusual having storms like that in this country right now, all the hurricanes and everything. So those would be more normal at the time of Himalayan area than it was in any place else. I don't know if that answers your question.
Definitely.
Yeah. After you were discharged, did you attend school under the provisions of the GI Bill?
Yes, I did. I benefited very much. I was luckier than clever in a lot of the things going on in respect to the war. That was one of the very good things. After the war, I had 4 years for the GI Bill available, and I used almost all of it. I used 2 years to finish undergraduate school, 1 year to get a master's degree, 1 year to go to spend a year in Basel, Switzerland, as a graduate student under the University of Maryland program. Also, I could do it because of the GI Bill of Rights, which gave me that opportunity to do it. And then I went back to get my doctoral degree, and unfortunately got a fellowship there. I didn't need the GI Bill anymore.
That's really cool. Then, after you were discharged, did you stay in touch with anyone you served with during the war?
I did for a few years, but those things gradually die out, and right now I have a hard time remembering them even, That was maybe during the late 40s and 50s, I'm in touch with a number of them, but then after the 1950s, and that was about 70 years ago, and I sort of lost touch with them gradually over the time. Sylvia, one of the friends I made in Shanghai in 1946 or so, kept in touch with her as Mount Nosy, and her family. She married by coincidence, unbelievable. She married a classmate of mine at Washington University when I went there. Because he was Swiss. He went back for Christmas holiday one year and met Sylvia, and he told me about this. I showed him a picture of the girl he's going to marry before he had ever met her. And I kept in touch with Sylvia and Peter, who's married her, all the time until she died just about 3 or 4 years ago. They came to this country and spent their lives here. I have a picture of them on 2 of her ponies out in front here. But I kept in touch with her right up to a couple of years ago. Most of the people I just didn't touch with. That was unusual because she ended up marrying a classmate of mine at Washington University.
Yeah. Wow. Did you attend any kind of reunions after the war or anything like that?
One time, the meteorology colleagues from NYU, about, I think, 10 years after the war, one of the people organized a reunion down in Long Island someplace, and I did attend that. That's the only one I ever attended. It's the only one that was ever held by them. Otherwise, I've not had it. I have joined the VFW relatively recently here in Posenkill because I had a lot of friends, the VFW friends I hadn't known during the war and all were down there, and I did join the VFW, but I unfortunately didn't do very much activity with them because I got tied up with other town activities. I was on the planning zoning board and town council and things like that, so I never did a lot with the veterans associations after the war.
And understand, young ladies, when he says he joined the VFW here in town relatively recently, that probably means 40 years ago. Right?
Right.
Probably maybe 50 years ago.
I'll skip this question because I already asked. Okay.
What about, didn't mention you and your brother using your money from GI Bill?
That, my brother and my brother was a year older than I was, but we both graduated from college at the same time, 1948. The GI Bill didn't pay for your holiday vacation time, but New York State did that year. That year, we both got a bonus from New York State for, I think, $200. And he and I decided we were going to spend a summer that we graduated touring the country. And he had an old Model A Ford, and we took that Model A Ford in the summer of 1948, and during the month of June, July, and August, we traveled something like 14,000 miles. We went down the East Coast along the mountains, along the South Coast of the Gulf Coast, up north in the western area, visited all the national parks, Grand Canyon and Yellowstone and all the national parks. Went down to Mexico City on the highway there. Boy, that was tough. We had a couple of flat tires, nobody around. But then we went back north again up through California and Oregon, Washington, and southern Canada, and back down across northern New York State back home. We spent over 14,000 miles in that trip, and we spent close to 3 months doing it. And it's very memorable because in that whole time we had not sleeping bag, we had jungle sleeping hammocks. We slept in at night in different places, and mostly in parks or national forests, but sometimes just along the road, tied to a farmer's fence or something. And during the whole time, we did not sleep inside a single night. We stayed outside every night for the whole time.
So that was your first activity after getting out of the war, both of you.
Right,
Yeah.
And again, the context of it is hard to imagine. So that was what year?
1948.
So that's 77 years ago.
Long time.
The average speed, if it was maybe 30 or 40 miles an hour.
Maximum speed the Model A would go is 40 miles an hour.
Right. So you're not 70 miles an hour. And for example, when's the last time you had to change a tire in your car? How many times would you say in that 3 months would you had to change a tire, repair a tire?
Not more than 3 or 4. The Model A was great. It didn't have much to repair. It didn't even have a gasoline pump. Gasoline was gravity fed into the engine.
I thought you had to stop with a lot more flat tires over that time.
No, not that many. Not more than 3 or 4. But anyway, it was a great time. But as I say, we didn't spend a single night inside. We spent every night in our jungle hammocks outside.
World War II jungle hammocks.
Army surplus.
To be honest, I don't think anybody could do that anymore.
Right.
Not because of their lack of ability, but the lack of change in the traffic. We had no interstate. Most of the road was 2-lane. The number of cars on the road was 10% of what it is today, very few. So we could do all these traveling on roads where there's very little traffic, And at nighttime we could tie up to a farmer's fence several times, and there wouldn't be more than 1 or 2 cars all night long pass by, It was a different situation. People could not do it today.
Yeah. Did the $400 last you the whole trip, Gene?
It did.
Wow.
Wow.
We cooked our own meals. We had a little Coleman stove, gasoline stove. And gasoline is only about, 12, 15 cents a gallon. And we didn't buy food, groceries and stuff that we needed, but we cooked our own meals.
This is a new.
The only thing we spent money for
This is a good.
stores, I think, we'd stop in the morning and stop some drugstore.
But World War II, during that time, I'm 10 years younger than Gene is. And I was in elementary school buying war stamps, helping my mother give out certificates for gas or sugar. Those things, you know. Ration tape, things.
Yeah.
It was a little different, you know.
And then a lot of this history is forgotten.
Right.
We
It's a
bought
long
war
time ago.
stamps once a week. 25 cents we bought a war stamp.
I remember coming home from NYU the first year. I guess leave a couple of times to come home for Christmas or something. I remember my father had a ration book. He had to get to work every day, and he got a little extra for if he could prove he needed to get to work. But for all other purposes, they had a ration book, 3 gallons of gasoline a month.
Months.
And sugar, I don't remember. Sugar was, and then we also went out and collected, give me a minute to think, milkweed pods. Did you hear?
No,
You heard
never.
that story? They had us children collecting milkweed pods. At one time, they thought the white puffy thing, the seed pod, would be good for life preservers.
Like this?
Life vests before they had a chance to come up with the proper thing they were using.
And before
Milkweed.
no such thing as plastic in those days.
Oh, yeah.
I think one thing I learned about like our textbook back when I was in Taiwan, I remember that like because our government was like really thankful for like the U.S. help, and they would print the U.S. flag and then image of how like the U.S. armies are like helping us on like rice bags and then different kinds of products.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's interesting.
yes.
Yeah.
So, kind of like getting into more details about like what did you do after the war or after you get discharged from the service?
After the war,
Yeah.
after I get discharged, I never really got completely discharged from the army. You know, I'm still a retired reserve officer of the army. I'm still on the retired list. I carry a card showing I'm a member of the armed forces yet.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
No wonder you get that discount at Home Depot.
Exactly.
Or Lowe's or whatever it is. Yeah.
But anyway, I'm still a major in the United States Army Air Corps, except it's now called the Air Force. Anyway, what I did after the war was most of my friends did who had quit college halfway through it. I finished my college career with the first at Albany State Teachers for a bachelor's and master's degree. Then I went to the University of Basel for a year of postgraduate study. And then I came back and taught a couple of years. And then
Where did you teach, Dad?
I taught at Albany State Teachers College, my old alma mater. And then I was given information from my boss was a good friend also. I really ought to go back and get a doctoral if I ever wanted to go on in teaching profession at college. I needed a doctorate degree, so I quit teaching and went Washington University in St. Louis, where I got my doctorate in physical chemistry, and then came back and came back to Albany and taught 2 more years, and met my wife Sue, got married, and then for a honeymoon we took out west and ended up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I spent 3 years in the geochemical laboratory there. And just decided I was getting bored there. I wanted to go back to teaching. So I ended up going back to Albany State, which is now State University of New York at Albany, and helped build a new campus down there. I very modestly say I not only helped build the campus, but I also helped build all the graduate programs and the doctoral programs at the university in the sciences and math, because I ended up, for whatever reason, I don't know, I ended up as the head of the science and mathematics division at Albany.
And meteorology, Gene.
Pardon?
And the meteorology ones.
ASRC, back to meteorology.
I also helped establish with Lynn Schaefer, who was the primary guy that established the well-known atmospheric sciences research center at Albany. Anyway, that's what I ended up doing. Then I retired when I was 65.
Get to do the things that you like.
Pardon?
You get to do the things that you love.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so nice.
Yeah, it's quite a life as you look back at it. I don't go for it, particularly for interviews like this. In some ways, it's good. It makes me think back a little how much I did enjoy all these things.
That kind of brings us to our last question. And what do you think your life would look like if you hadn't enlisted, and how do you think you've changed because of your experience?
Well, I don't know for sure, but I think if I hadn't enlisted and served in the Army, I might not have gone on as far as I was able to in the college and such, because I didn't have the money to do it. There's the GI Bill of Rights. It really helped me after the war get started in directions that I might never have gone in. I probably would have ended up doing similar things, but in different ways. That's because I was interested in science and math, of course, right out from high school days on up. And so I would have ended up doing something in science and math, but how it would have worked probably be a lot different.
Gene, did your parents ever talk about college as something you should do?
Yes.
They did not go to college, did they? Your
They
parents?
did. Neither one of them went to college. My father had wanted to go to law school, but he just didn't make it. He had to go to work. My family didn't have much money at all. Had a hard time going through the Depression years in the late 20s or early 30s. Very difficult time. And so he ended up as a chauffeur for, excuse me, I got gassed. Anyway, but the one thing that they did, both of them always told me, I really needed to go to college. That was the one thing that they said. Otherwise, they had very little to tell me, because they hadn't had experience themselves in that way, you know. My mother, she helped support the family she was a really good pianist, and she helped support the family by working, first of all, in some dance groups around the city of Troy and such, and secondly, for 20 years, she served as the organist of the United Presbyterian Church in Troy. And so that way she's making a little money to help herself. But she was always a musician. That was her lifetime piano. She's really good at the piano.
She told me too, she used to play for the silent movies.
That was
With her being.
That's one of the other jobs she had.
That was a piano
She
player.
played for
Which I thought was interesting, you know.
the silent movies before. She played for them.
Because she could change keys and instantly go from one rhythm to the other. Just
Depending if somebody was singing, she could arrange it so it was just the right thing. She had an ability that very few people have, actually, musically. But what I remember when I was young, maybe 5, 6, 7, she wanted me to learn to play the piano too, and I never did. I couldn't. But one of the things we did then, the piano was in the living room down Collins Avenue, down near Emma Willard. And one of those little houses on the side there, you had a piano in the living room, and the kitchen was out another room away and around the corner. And we used to have a game. She'd have me go in and hit any 1, 2, or 3 keys on the piano at a time, white or black keys, and she would call in and tell me the name of those keys. She did it correctly all the time. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that is amazing.
She still could do that at 90.
Dad, you remember the story you were telling me about you were flying into the Fogden airport? I
Yeah.
bet they'd love to hear about that. It's my favorite story. Almost died.
Probably one of the many times I was very lucky. No, it's one of those familiarization flights I took over the Himalayas with a pilot friend of mine who fortunately was a very good pilot. He was flying Air Transport Command planes over the hump normally, you know. And
What
so
was
I
he
told him,
carrying, Gene?
"Pardon?
What was he carrying?
What was the load?
Oh, I had gasoline,
Yeah.
food, and
Yeah, it's close enough. Huh?
all kinds of stuff they needed in China were flying over from Luoyang into China. And so I took familiarization flight with them. I got orders to do it. You couldn't take passengers without official orders. So as operation officer, I got orders to do that as a familiarization. And so we took off, and at the time there's no direct weather reports from China. There are 2 places you could land in China, Kunming and Luoyang. I was stationed at Luoyang later, but at the time I wasn't. So we're flying from Luoyang to Kunming, and we got over the mountains, absolutely gorgeous scene at the tops of the mountains and everything, but we got over on the China side with the gasoline. The pilots used to always argue with the operations officer how much gasoline they could have. And you get more or less depending upon what the weather prediction might be, what might happen. And we didn't have a lot of extra gas. We got over the Kunming and landed. We had low, the mountain peaks, it's like New Mexico, we have plateaus and such, and above the plateaus you have mountains all around. And both Kunming and Luoyang are down lower than the high mountain peaks around, so you had to be careful when you're flying. We got over to Kunming where we were going to land, and it was completely socked in. We came down as just about the level of the mountains around, and we got in touch with radio touch with the tower there. So the tower told us more or less what direction we're in. They told us the only radio contact we had was the tower voice, and they heard the plane up there but couldn't see us, and we couldn't see them. And so we started down. We couldn't go to Luoyang because the gasoline supply was too low to get there. So that we had to land there. So using the tower, this pilot was a good pilot, fortunately, kept circling around and kept close enough so the tower could hear us all right. That one was probably away from most of the mountain peaks.
And you're completely sightless. You can't see a thing. You're in the clouds.
Oh, fog.
It's in the clouds, couldn't see a thing.
Can't see a thing. You're
So
flying blind.
We're circling over this, was completely blind, staying within hearing range of the tower. Kept going down lower and lower because the tower said there's about 200 or 300 foot ceiling. If we got down that low, we could probably see it. So we kept going down, and then finally we're getting down so that if the altimeter was right, we were probably about 400 or 500 feet, but couldn't see the ground yet. And so I was sitting here between the pilot, co-pilot, looking out, trying to see something, couldn't see a thing. But I heard all the radio. I had earphones so I could hear the tower radio. And just as we're getting down about this level, tower started yelling at us, turn right, turn. You're heading right at the tower.
Wow.
So we took this plane.
That's a movie.
The pilot took the plane, put it up about 45 degrees in one wing, a sharp turn, but didn't want to get too far away either. Did the same thing the other way, at the same time going down a bit, and then at about 300 foot, he said, I see you, brother, I'm going down. He dove down again and landed the thing shortly.
Wow.
Everything worked out well. It turns out it was not the runway. It was a taxi strip he landed on.
Yeah, but you made it.
What kind of an airplane was it, Gene?
It was a C-50, DC-4, DC-3, I guess. DC-3, C-54. It was a big 4-engine plane. It wasn't a simple plane. It's a big, C-54. I forgot it's a DC-4, I guess DC-3.
C-54 though.
C-54 is the military name of it, cargo plane. But I tell you, that's about as close as I ever came to that at the beginning of the day. But at the time, it was exciting. It didn't take too much. But I went into Kunming and spent a couple hours in the city of Kunming, and then came back and stayed the night, and then turned around next morning and flew back. That was probably one of the most exciting times.
One of the things that I picked up that you have talking about World War II was that you, no matter where you were, you said that the people were good and friendly, and you could talk to anybody, and you liked to, when you had time, you used to explore around the area and go to the post office and buy stamps and odds and ends. And
when I had free time, I used to like to run around. First overseas was Agra, which is where the Taj Mahal is. Mm-hmm. I could get to Taj Mahal on bicycle. I used to bicycle down, walk through the Taj Mahal and all, get to know the territory and the people. I got a picture sometime I got to find again. A little old Indian guy, he had a white beard at the time. There's someplace near Agra, I was riding on my bicycle, and I came across him. I stopped to see what he was doing because he had a thing he's pulling back and forth on a big block of granite. And I stopped and he chatted with me a little bit. He said, he said, I'm sawing a block of some granite. We're building a new Jain temple here. This is going to be part of a Jain temple. And I looked to see how he was sawing that block of granite. It wasn't granite, it was limestone marble, I guess. And the way he was doing it, he had a like a saw, regular saw, but instead of a blade, it had about a tenth of an inch, a small cord, some kind of cord like rope except rope was very small, and he had a pot of water and some sand next to him, and he'd saw with this on this block of granite, and every few minutes he'd go down with his hand, take some of the water or some salt, and put it in the groove that he was doing, and then he'd go back and saw again for a while. And he said he'd been sawing that block for, I don't know, a year and a half or so.
Oh my gosh.
And I asked him when they expected to finish that temple. There are a lot of other people around there doing other stuff, working on it. This was 1946, I think it was. I asked him should be done around, we hope that was done by the late 1990s. And he was sawing this block of limestone marble with sand and and a cord.
Wow.
Just sitting there going back and forth, taking about a year to get one block done.
Wow.
I have a picture of him yet. I gotta find that again. He said he had to take his picture. Yeah, okay. But I used to like to travel Calcutta, Shanghai, Luliang, all the cities, and I liked to, and had free time. I liked to walk around the outskirts of the town and see what the people live like, not just in the center of town. And that's when I really found all the people that I came in contact with, Chinese, Indians, and all the cities, the country people as well as the city people are friendly. I didn't see any difference between them. Basically, the American people is over with. They're all kind, friendly people I came up with.
Do you remember you in Beijing, Peking?
Pardon?
Beijing and
Beijing.
Peking. You remember going to Beijing and Peking?
Oh, yes. After the war, as I say, we evacuated Luliang rather rapidly. And I got sent to Shanghai, where I worked in Shanghai Air Base there for El Dum Dum, it was called, the air base. And then after the war, a lot of people started to go home. And I wasn't one of the first people to go home because I hadn't been in service long enough. But anyway, the George Marshall, who was Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Army during the war and Secretary of State after the war, he came with a small delegation to Peiping and had a delegation there working with Chiang Kai-shek, the president of China, trying to find out some way to make some kind of peace deal between Chiang Kai-shek's army and the communists who were trying to overthrow it. So I got sent up there. When he came over, they needed some people to help staff his headquarters, and I got sent up from Shanghai to Peiping. And I was only there a few months, but when I was there, because then I got discharged, came home. But I was there a few months, and during that time, I got to get around Peiping a lot. I was able to get a Jeep to ride around the countryside a little bit too. It had shoulder patches on, this had it in Chinese, make peace, man, so that presumably anybody could saw that they're supposed to let you alone and not bother you.
But that's where you shook hands with?
Pardon?
Didn't you get a medal then?
Oh yeah, what not? But during the time I was at Peiping with General Marshall's headquarters, Chiang Kai-shek, the Chinese president, had an appreciation evening for the American service people there. And they put on a Chinese opera, and before the opera they had an hour, cocktail hour, was this and that. And at that time, Chiang Kai-shek, all the people there, he was personally awarding a Chinese medal for the service. And later I got it officially, and I got it through, he sent it to the Army headquarters. The Army headquarters forwarded mine to me with a letter saying I was entitled to wear it on my uniform. It's the Order of the Flying Banner of the Chinese Army. I still have that. You know. But as I say, I happened to be in the right place at the right time. I didn't do anything terribly important in Peiping except take care of what needed to be done for Staff Marshal's headquarters.